slow start features a did not qualify in race number 2.
We sure had an awful lot of stuff go wrong this year already.
This is Jimmy Brock, and he is hot. That makes his boss, Joe Amato, hot. A new national record at the Pomona opener and currently the points leader.
I guess this dog can hunt, huh?
Corey McLennan sizzles. He won in race number 2 in Phoenix.
You gotta be kidding. I don't believe it.
Kenny Bernstein 2 weeks ago in Houston, he didn't qualify. Hot not.
First time we haven't qualified for an NHRA Winston event in 10 years.
Dick LaHaye's the guy that throws coal on the Scott Coletta flame. He's the current national record holder at a 472.
He asked me what I wanted to run in Houston, what we thought it would take, and I said, well, between 72 and 74. He said, okay, that's what I thought, too. Hopefully we can keep it up.
And in his last year of driving, John Prudhomme could become the hottest of all after his win just 2 weeks ago.
Thanks again, man. This is a ball, I tell you. I may not quit, you know.
Today, Gainesville Raceway in Gainesville, Florida plays host to the 4th stop on the 18-event, $19 million Winston Championship Tour. Welcome, everyone, to exclusive same-day coverage of the silver anniversary edition of the Mac Tools Gatornationals. 2 weeks ago in Houston, Texas, we saw the quickest elapsed time ever in drag racing, a brilliant 4:72, a new national record set by Scott Coletta. Everybody said, let's wait until we get to Gainesville and see what happens there. Well, what has happened? We have not thus far this weekend had those great times, and there is one big reason. It's hot. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave McClellan, and welcome to a sun-drenched Gainesville Raceway, where literally tens of thousands of fans have been anticipating those big numbers, but they may have been a little disappointed because of the heat and the humidity. It has affected the racetrack. It's affected the car's ability to make horsepower, but one thing it has done, it's tended to level out the competition just a little bit. In Pro Stock, if you don't know it already, there is a war going on. Right now, let's switch to our Battlefront correspondent, Steve Evans.
Dave, it is war between the Oldsmobiles and the Dodges, and it could get nuclear before the season ends. More particularly, the Oldsmobiles of Warren Johnson and his son Kurt, and the Dodges of Darrell Alderman and Scott Jeffrey-On. Let's go back to our previous ESPN telecast from Houston, Texas. What a final in Pro Stock. The Thrilla in Manila, the fight at the lights. Neither the Dodge with Jeffrey-On or the Oldsmobile with Johnson would stage. They just sat there. The crowd roared built. They loved this drama. Finally, NHRA officials said enough is enough and backed them out of the beams. Starter Buster Couch chastising Warren Johnson. Other officials talking to the crew chiefs. Finally, they fire him up again, stage him again. Same deal. They just sit there. Jeffrey-On flipping the throttle occasionally, trying to spook Johnson. Finally, Warren moves in first. Jeffrey-On follows. Jeffrey-On gets the hole shot. That was the bottom line of this whole deal. But it wasn't enough to fend off Warren Johnson at the finish line. And speaking of the finish line, I have never seen Warren Johnson quite that high.
The kid's just a jerk out there trying to play his game. You better learn how to drive a race car before he starts playing games like that.
Well, it looked like both of you were playing the game. Anybody can stage at any time.
I don't have to stage last or first. I'll stage when I'm ready.
And in the 2 weeks since Houston, it's been a war of words in the motoring press. Let's see, Scott Jeffrey-On called Warren Johnson a wimp. Warren Johnson said he's smarter than the Dodge team. He knew there'd be a burn down in Houston. He went to the line with a cold motor, and that's why he won. Oh, he also said Jeffrey-On wasn't a bad guy till he got Hutchinized, talking about the crew chief on the Dodge, Dave Hutchins.
Well, really, I don't know what that means. I've been trying to figure that out. I don't know what Warren's trying to say by that.
I think he's trying to say that you ordered Jeffrey-On not to stage if the car ran out of gas.
Well, sounds good, but I don't really think I have that kind of control over Jeffrey-On.
So it's not like pasteurizing or homogenizing?
Not that I know of. I don't really know what it means.
And as expected in qualifying for the Gatornationals, it's the Dodges and Oldsmobiles at the top of the list. Now in funny car, Houston winner Al Hoffman is solidly qualified. He never seems to go for number one. But in the number one spot, much to the thrill of this capacity crowd, is Japanese national Kenji Okazaki. And of course, in funny car competition, you never count out Winston champion John Force. He's won the last two Gatornationals. But my pick to click is Mark Oswald, who won here 3 years ago and qualified with a solid 5:10 in the heat on Saturday. Dave?
Steve, what a show this huge crowd is seeing today. The 1994 NHRA Mac Tools Gatornationals is being brought to you by Midas. the Midas way, the way it should be. And by Valvoline. People who know use Valvoline. Yesterday, this was Kenny Bernstein's crew chief, Dale Armstrong. In a moment, we'll find out why he was not a happy man. Top Fuel Eliminator, the story of Kenny Bernstein. Remember, it was 2 weeks ago at Houston, Texas, when Kenny failed to qualify for the first time in 11 years. Well, here at the silver anniversary running of the Mac Tools Gatornationals, Bernstein not only qualified, but has done well in eliminations. The big problem is, every run he makes down the quarter mile, he hurts the engine, forcing the Budweiser King crew into a lot of between rounds work. Right now, let's take a look at the Winston Point standings in Top Fuel Eliminator coming in to Gainesville. The five-time Winston champ Joe Amato was on top, followed by Corey McLenathan, Scott Coletta, Shelly Anderson, and Rance McDaniel with only 452 points out of first place. Kenny Bernstein was not even in the top 10, and believe me, the point standings won't look anything like this when we're done today. Kenny waited until the last of 4 qualifying sessions to make this field. The worst that could have happened here, he would have been a DNQ for the second race in a row, but he made it. It was costly, a 489.
Obviously took a lot of fuel away to try to get it to run on 8, and as you say, it's a little crispy, but hey, we're just happy and thankful to get in this show the way it's been the past couple of 3 weeks.
Kenny Bernstein qualified number 9. That meant he raced number 8 qualifier Jimmy Nix in the first round, and Bernstein prevailed. His opponent in round number 2 was the winner of the race between the number 1 qualifier, that's Corey McLenathan, for the 3rd time in 4 races this season. Corey Mack ended up on top at 4.80 seconds. His opponent, the number 16 qualifier in the Smokin' Joe's Racing team car from Candies and Hughes, Jim Head, who had a 497 to qualify 16th, but as so often happens, what's on paper means nothing when they come to the starting line. Head pulled off the upset, and Corey Mack reflected.
We're running so consistent all weekend. It's hard to take a first round loss, but just these things don't always do what you want them to, and that's just the game we play.
So Corey Mack, the number 1 qualifier, out in round number 2. That means no more points at the Gatornationals for Corey Mack. Jim Head moved to round number 2 for the first time this season. His opponent, Kenny Bernstein, and Head's time was no fluke in that first round victory over McLenathan. He ran 488. That gave him the lane choice over Bernstein, who had a 491 winning effort. There's the crew chief for Bernstein, Dale Armstrong, who for the past several weeks has been fighting this Budweiser King. It has been a difficult task indeed. We were on board in round number 2 as Bernstein outdistanced Jim Head and moved to the semifinals.
Kenny, you're getting there first, but making a lot of aluminum ashtrays out of pistons in the process.
We sure are, Steve. That's no fun, but winning is what counts. We'll just keep after the fuel system, Dale will, and try to get it to where it's rich enough to make it all the way. It went a little further, believe it or not, even though it looks pretty bad.
Certainly not dropping cylinders.
No, we're not doing that right now.
It's too lean to do that.
Bernstein's winning time of 493 at 291, a losing effort by Head at 503. So, what a surprise it was when Kenny Bernstein moved to the round of Final 4. Bernstein into the semifinals. After all the problems, he's still there. Meantime, Joe Amato, the leader in the Winston points chase, fell on hard times as well in round number 1. His opponent was Pat Austin out of Tacoma, Washington. Amato had qualified number 4 at a 482. Austin a full 1/10 of a second slower at a 492. As the 2 cars approached the starting line, everyone felt that Pat Austin was going to have to pull off a driving job, and he rose to the occasion. A giant advantage off the starting line and a big win.
Joe, a double dose of bad news. You lose on a hole shot and the Winston points lead along with it.
Well, Steve, what was the difference in the retees?
Just a couple of hundreds.
Yeah, but he has little tires, I have big tires, so really that's a pretty close lead. But
Deceptive, yeah.
we expected the car to run decent. He ran good, and that's the way racing goes. He'll be back.
I know that.
Our instant replay shows you what happened at the starting line. Austin had the advantage. Amato had the quicker time of 481 to Austin's winning 485. Moving back again into round number 1 competition, the number 5 qualifier, Scott Coletta, was up against number 12, Tommy Johnson Jr. The 2 young Lions battled it out, and it was Scott Coletta prevailing. Scotty had qualified in the number 5 spot at a 482, ran 4.853 to beat TJ Jr. His second round opponent, Pat Austin, had run an identical elapsed time in winning his first round race with the Castrol Syntec car. Scotty got the lane choice based on mile an hour and took the win.
Yeah, good deal. I think mid 80s will, should win this thing. Just got to get from A to B, and hopefully, if it goes from A to B and the driver can do his job. I don't think I did that time, but we'll try next time.
Scotty was really late off the line. Fortunate for him that his opponent smoked the tires. So Kenny Bernstein and Scott Coletta in the final 4. On the other side of the ladder, number 2 qualifier Don Prudhomme had hoped to be able to ride on the coattails of his win 2 weeks ago at Houston, but his opponent in the first round was the number 15 qualifier Rochelle Splatt, the newest and last member of the Slick 5300 mile-an-hour club. She set that time at Houston. In pre-race activities here today, Don Prudhomme, on his final strike tour, his last year as a driver, had a street named for him here at Gainesville Raceway, but none of it paid off in the first round. He lost to Rochelle Splatt, but he said this.
That's drag racing. I've taken a many lumps all last year and the year before, so, it's disappointing, but we'll come back.
Don Prudhomme losing in round number 1 to Rochelle Splatt's off-pace 5:14, but that doesn't matter because she advanced into the second round, where her opponent would be the winner of the first round race between Connie Coletta and Mike Dunn. Connie had qualified in the number 7 spot with a 488 and nearly matched that as the American International Airways team car had a 489 in the big win over Dunn. Then in round number 2, it was Rochelle Splatt in the far lane at the wheel of the Luxor Casino Hotel car against Connie Coletta. All she could do was watch.
You got into the 480s where you need to be.
Yes, we've been consistent. This is the 3rd time or 4th time we've run 482. So it's 489, but it's on the high side. But we'll see what happens in the next round.
See you in the final 4.
Oh, thank you.
As you've already noted, the 2 Colettas are on opposite sides of the ladder. They could meet in the championship round. Number 3 qualifier Rance McDaniel was looking strong with a fine 481 qualifying time, but Bobby Baldwin at the wheel of Chris Garamassini's car pulled off the upset in the first round. It was Shelly Anderson, the winner at Pomona, up against the reigning Winston champ Eddie Hill. Hill's problems continue, and Anderson had moved into round number 2 to race Baldwin. Shelly had qualified well at a 489. Baldwin had qualified with a 494, but here in the round number 2 racing, it didn't matter. Shelly smoked the tires. Baldwin smoked out one of the Golden Greeks motors, but still was the winner.
Bobby Baldwin, you heard it obviously. Can you fix it? You and the Greek run pretty lean.
I think we can fix it. We'll have to borrow a couple of parts, but I think we can get it back together. If we
hope you do.
Let's see what Grandpa wants to do.
Bobby Baldwin referring to Grandpa Chris Garamassini's. He is his son-in-law. So it'll be Connie Coletta against Bobby Baldwin. Connie having the lane choice. Son Scott is on the other side of the ladder. And it is Kenny Bernstein and Scott Coletta battling it out. And once again, a Coletta holds the choice of lane. A giant crowd in the grandstands here at Gainesville Raceway, and there's a huge mass of people when Kenny Bernstein signs autographs. We'll be right back with the final 4 in Top Fuel. Launching hard off the starting line, a fine 489 at 293 miles an hour. Connie has shown incredible consistency throughout this day. He had 480s in both the first and second round, and now matches them with another 480 here in the semis. This is son Scott Coletta, the quickest and fastest drag racer of all time, at the wheel of the team American International Airways car. His opponent, the Budweiser King, Kenny Bernstein, would like to get any kind of break at all. Remember, he has had nothing but problems. 2 weeks ago, he failed to qualify. He made it on the last attempt here, and every run since that time, he's been hurting motors. Let's go to Steve.
Well, I guess you just dial in another 489, huh?
It's only got a bracket car in it.
No oil out of it. It's got more.
It's got more.
If the air cools off and the track gets a little better, you can maybe lean on it a bit.
I hope so. We were going to do it this time, and we figured, well, let's just not do something dumb. We'll just take it and save it for the last round.
I don't have to ask you who you want to race in the last round.
No doubt about it. We know there'll be one Coletta in the final. We'll find out here in a few minutes who's going to, maybe there's 2.
Let's find out right now, Dave.
Steve, that was Connie's 3rd consecutive consecutive 489 during eliminations today. Dick LaHaye checking over the engine on Scott Coletta's car. He has tuned this young man to not only the quickest elapsed time in history, a new national record set 2 weeks ago at 4:72. As Connie looks on intently from the far end of the track, Dale Armstrong, the crew chief for Kenny Bernstein, as we look on with the Budweiser in-car camera, looking down that long nose piece on Bernstein's top-fueled dragster. Problems again for Bernstein. And Connie's happy.
It's a Coletta clash in the final round.
But Steve, take a look. It is a big fire for Bernstein. The tire finally giving way after the heat from the exploding engine got the rubber so hot, literally it blew that tire. Bernstein has got the car under control. It is scraping itself to a stop on the little pads that are welded to the bottom of the frame rails to prevent damage to the frame. Kenny kept the car straight in his lane and brought it to a stop just as the safety safari pulled up. Watch in replay. Look in the far side of the racetrack. You can see the oil smoke coming out the back of Bernstein's car. Then a flash of flame or two out of the headers, and then it torched off. The ball of flame produced such an intense heat that it literally melted the rubber in the tire on the right-hand side. Look from another angle in replay. Watch as Bernstein struggled to maintain control of the car. The tire let go. It sort of listed over to the side, but he was able to get it safely stopped.
Kenny, this is really not the way you want to race, knowing you have to blow them up.
No, not really, and we're not doing it intentionally at all. I mean, Dale's trying to catch up with it. We're just off on the fuel system, like I've said since day one, since we got here, and we're not trying to do this by any means. I want everybody to understand that. Certainly Budweiser, Quaker State, and Mac Tools by all means, and all the fans. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do every round, and that's the name of the game. We want to win a race, and that's what we're here for.
Good job keeping it right side up.
Well, it kept straight that time. It was easy. Thanks.
So Kenny Bernstein has to look forward to yet another day for Scott Coletta. He has to look forward to the distinction of racing his dad in the final round. On that run, Scott ran a 4:79 and a new national record, 3:05.
You should have seen your dad down here. How about that national record, 305?
Oh, man, I tell you what, Dicko, he's just incredible. If he was here right now, I'd kiss him.
He begged right into the camera for you to give him a chance in the final.
Who, the old man?
Yeah.
What do you think? Not a chance.
Cuts no slack. He's a Coletta, right?
Hey, he comes out the winner either way. He gets the check.
Could be fun.
Steve, it will be fun. We'll be right back. Gatornationals here at Gainesville Raceway. If you have been a follower of pro stock racing on the Winston Championship Trail thus far this season, and who hasn't, you know the story has been the Oldsmobiles of the Johnson family and the two Dodges. But here at Gainesville, things have changed just a bit. One of the Johnsons did not qualify well, and as a result, we have a new driver breaking into the top four in pro stock. It is Jim Yates and his Dynamax Pontiac Firebird. Right now, let's take a look at the Winston point standings as pro stockers came to Gainesville. Warren Johnson, the reigning Winston champ, held a lead of only 200 points over Scott Jeffrey on. Darrell Alderman followed in third. Then Kurt Johnson and Jim Yates rounded out the top five after 3 of 18 events for the 94 season. In round number 1, Kurt Johnson, who had only been able to qualify number 8, was up against Ricky Smith at the wheel of the Slick 50 Pontiac. And guess what happened? Kurt Johnson stumbled. He stubbed his toe in this first round race. Kurt had qualified number 8. That gave him the lane choice over the number 9 qualifier, Ricky Smith. Kurt selected the lane nearest the camera, but both drivers had terrible lights. The only thing about it was, in the side-by-side matchup, Ricky Smith was a whole lot quicker off the line.
Kurt, you both ran at 23, but that wasn't your usual kind of reaction time. A little off there.
Yeah, we've been messing around with this new air shifter and stuff in the car, and I really haven't been comfortable all weekend. We qualified in a bad spot. We qualified number 8, and, you know, we're looking at racing Dad's second round. It's just been one of them bummer weekends.
So Kurt Johnson's points earning at the Gatornationals was over after round number 1. So as Ricky Smith advanced to round number 2, he thought he was seeing an awful lot of Johnsons, and he was, because his opponent in the second round was number 1 qualifier Warren Johnson. In qualifying, WJ had been the only car in the 7.0s, running a 7.08 second elapsed time. He beat Mark Osborne in the first round race. The GM Performance Parts Oldsmobile had the lane choice. Warren had run a 7:12 in his defeat of Osborne. As they left the starting line, Smith had the slight advantage, but Warren Johnson, as always, had the power.
Well, we have a little fun in the starting line, and then we whip them with a 7-11.
Well, 11's pretty decent for us today. It's a little tricky out there. It's just a matter of making consistent runs more than making real fast runs.
For you, is one lane better than the other?
We don't know because we haven't been in the other lane yet. But we looked at what's up there, and we felt that the right lane at this particular time was better for us, but that's not to say there's anything wrong with the left lane.
Headed for the Final Four in the Oldsmobile.
3 races have been run thus far this season, and WJ has won 2 of them. Back in round number 1, Jim Yates, the number 4 qualifier, handily defeated Steve Schmidt, while the surprising Frank Iaconio, number 5, got a break when the number 12 qualifier, Bob Glidden, red-lighted with his Ford Thunderbird. Yates had qualified with a fine 7:12 elapsed time and held lane choice in the second round against Iaconio. A 7:18 was his time in the first round. The changing weather conditions and the sunshine on the racetrack provided quite a challenge for both crew chief and driver alike. But this was one of the closest races you will ever see. Who won it? Jim Yates. A 7:17 was his elapsed time. But the important figure was the margin of victory at the finish line when you combine the reaction time and the elapsed time on the track. This one was less than 1/1000 of a second. Wow.
Mathematically, that was a dead heat.
Boy, it sure looked close down there. We give it all we had.
I guess we're going to have to throw Pontiac into this pro stock war along with the Dodges and the Oldsmobiles now, huh?
Well, we're working hard on it. You know, Richard and the guys back at the shop have got this Dynamax Pontiac formula tuned up, and we're running pretty strong right now. We're having a little trouble with the clutch today, but I think we'll get it tuned in for the next round.
Richard Maskin, the crew chief for Jim Yates, has his driver in the semifinals. On the other side of the ladder, Scott Jeffreyon got a giant break. When Ray Franks had problems, Jeffreyon himself broke the rear end on the single. And Mike Thomas and Billy Ewing battled it out, with Mike Thomas prevailing. Jeffreyon had qualified in the number 2 spot at a 7.10 at 195 miles an hour in the Mopar Parts Dodge Daytona. Thomas held the lane choice as a result of Jeffreyon having his mechanical problems in round number 1. The Pennzoil Oldsmobile Cutlass selected the lane furthest from our cameras, and we had a real treat. We got to ride on board with Scott Jeffreyon here in round number 2. Thomas got the advantage off the starting line, but Jeffreyon pulled the shift levers in time and won it at a 7:10.
New rear end makes a world of difference, huh? 7-10.
Yeah, it feels good to do that in the heat of the day. And it rattled them pretty good out there in second and third gear, but it's Wayne County horsepower for you.
Now, Alderman is up next. If he wins, you're going to have to face off with your teammate.
I sure am, you know, and hey, he's the best in the business, and we really enjoy racing each other.
So as Jeffreyon moves to the Final Four, he keeps pace with Warren Johnson in the quest after those Winston Championship points. Darrell Alderman indeed did advance to round number 2 at the expense of Tim Jost. Mark Howick and Larry Morgan met up in a battle of Oldsmobile Cutlasses in the first round, and Larry Morgan prevailed. Darrell Alderman had qualified number 3 with his Dodge at a 7:12 and ran 7:08 in the first round, one of the quick times of eliminations. Larry Morgan had a 7:15. That put him in the number 11 spot, and his victory over Mark Howick had netted him an elapsed time of 7:15. As we got a chance in round number 2 to ride on board with Larry Morgan in the Castrol Super Clean Oldsmobile. As the 2 cars came to the starting line, it was in reality a battle of dueling in-car cameras. The Mopar in-car camera with Darrell Alderman driving gives us a shot. There's Morgan. He has got the push-button type gear shift device. You see him just hit the button stalk out in the middle, while Darrell Alderman uses the shift levers to go into high gear. He crossed the finish line a winner at 7:10.
Darrell Alderman comes out with a big smile, as always, and I'll make it a little broader. You got lane choice by 0.02 over your teammate.
Well, you know, just as long as you've got lane choice, it don't matter by how much.
So it is an incredible Final Four matchup between the 2 Dodges, Darrell Alderman and Scott Jeffreyon, with Darrell holding the choice of lanes. And Warren Johnson comes up against the surprising Jim Yates. WJ gets to pick the lane by some 0.06 of a second. We'll be coming right back with a Final Four action in Pro Stock. I'm Dave McClelland, and it is time for semifinal action in Pro Stock Eliminator. Warren Johnson against Jim Yates. But before we get to the racing, let me take a moment to urge you to become a member of a very special organization, the National Hot Rod Association. For just $52 a year, you get 48 issues of National Dragster, a patch, a pin, a rule book, and a whole lot more. And if you order by calling the number on your screen, you'll get a free copy of Diamond P's home video, Drag Racing 92. Make that call today. While some of the racers may tell you that there's no difference in the lanes, Warren Johnson and his GM Performance Parts Oldsmobile, who has the lane choice, has picked the one nearest the camera. And as we have noted throughout eliminations, the quicker cars have tended to this side of the racetrack. Now, Jim Yates, if you'll recall, is the guy we kind of focused on at the very start of this show, because Jim Yates is definitely a contender at this point. He qualified in the number 4 spot and is getting tougher by the moment with his Dynamax Pontiac Firebird Formula car. And Warren Johnson wins it. Jim Yates involved in yet another tremendously close race. Remember, just a round ago, he defeated Frank Iaconio by less than 1,000th of a second. Let's go back and look at this one again. The advantage off the starting line obviously went to Yates in the far lane. But as they neared the 8th mile point, Warren Johnson had started to make up some difference. And as they used the last 660 feet of the racetrack, WJ and the GM Performance Parts Oldsmobile pulled ahead by 1,000.
Were you absolutely sure I was coming over here to talk to you?
I wouldn't have bet any farm on it. I'll guarantee you that, Steve.
A thousandth of a second, a 712 for you. You had to run him down.
Well, I think Jim won one by 1,000th round before, so I guess in the long run it all balances out. I've done the same thing in both ways myself.
One thing we know for sure, in the final you're going to have to dodge another Dodge.
There'll be a GM Performance Parts Olds in the final in one of the Dodges, I guess.
Could we ever repeat a Houston? Who knows?
Steve, if I were a wagering man, I certainly wouldn't bet against it. But the big question remains, which of the Dodges will it be? Will it be Scott Jeffrey on for a rematch of what went on in Houston and the antics on the starting line? Or will it be his teammate, Darrell Alderman, who provides us what I consider to be the best onboard camera shot of all as you look out the driver's side window at Jeffrey on coming up into the staging beams? The one thing I would wager here, there will be no staging battle between Darrell Alderman and Scott Jeffrey on. The RPMs begin to mount on both cars. Let's watch and listen. That's why I love that onboard camera shot. As you looked out the window, you saw Darrell Alderman pull ahead and defeat his teammate with a 7:09, 196-mile-an-hour pass. Alderman into the finals to race Warren Johnson, and here as we look again, you see what may have been part of the problem for Scott Jeffrey on. That puff of smoke at the starting line, indicative of the loss of traction. If he spun the tires there, he was not competitive in the last 1/8 of a mile. Alderman 7:09 gives him lane choice in the finals against Warren Johnson. What a race to be.
That was just huge.
Yeah, you know, I don't know what happened. Scott shook or what happened to him, but, you know.
What happened to him is you just drilled him on his starting line. What happened to him?
Well, he had one coming to him. He drilled me at Phoenix, so I think the fans are going to see a lot of this in the semifinal and the final. 2 cars as close as these are.
You've got lane choice. Which lane will you stick Warren Johnson in?
The left.
He didn't like the left, does he?
As I said before, some drivers think there's a difference. We'll find out when we come back. Eliminator. Starting the first round, 5 of the top 6 points earners coming into Gainesville were all on the same side of the ladder. That means one of those top 6 gets a big break. But the one thing about it for sure, you're going to find a major shuffling of the point standings at the completion of this Gatornationals championship. How were they standing as they came to Gainesville? Let's take a look now at our Winston Championship points chase as it relates to Funny Car Eliminator. For the first time in his long career, Al Hoffman was leading with Casey Spurlock in second, followed by John Force, Cruz Pedregon, and Chuck Etchells in the number 5 spot. In the first round of racing, Etchells, who had qualified number 8, put away the points leader, Al Hoffman. Meantime, Kenji Okazaki, who had run 5:06 in qualifying, defeated the number 16 car, Gordy Bonnet. Chuck Etchells' elapsed time in qualifying was a 5:19. He ran a 5:17 in his first round victory over Hoffman. Okazaki had qualified with that 5:06 and used a 5:15 to beat up on Gordy. In round number 2, it was Okazaki with the lane choice, and it did him no good as he violently smoked the tires and crossed the center line. Chuck Etchells won it at a 5:17. Okazaki was disappointed.
Kenji, you had your hands full that time. A good job of keeping it off the wall.
Yeah, I think so, yeah, but just tire smoke, you know. I can't do nothing out there.
So the upset victory by Chuck Etchells puts him into the Final Four, fills one of our slots there. In first round action, Cruz Pedregon, who had qualified number 4, defeated Whit Bazemore, while Casey Spurlock, the winner at Pomona earlier this year, defeated the surprising and very strong Gary Bolger. Spurlock out of Nashville, Tennessee, had qualified 5th at a 5:14. He had run a 5:28 in defeating Bolger. Pedregon, number 4 qualifier at a 5:10, came close to matching that in his victory over Bazemore. He ran 5:12 in the first round, had the lane choice, took that lane the furthest from our camera. The fruit-of-the-loom car of Spurlock in the near lane. The McDonald's Oldsmobile in the far lane, and it was Spurlock the winner.
At about 1,000 feet, the driver became an important part of the equation here.
Tell you what, Steve, it was moving around a great deal out there. And, you know, I've told you this before. When you get a crew like I've got and you go out there and this thing starts to move around and I'm trying to turn on the wind light, I'll do anything in the world for these guys. And I got it to the other end.
While Spurlock is looking strong in the Winston points chase, this is his first Final Four appearance since that Winter Nationals championship. Meantime, on the other side of the ladder, Mark Oswald, who had qualified number 3 with a very strong showing, defeated Richard Hartman, and Dean Scusa got a break when Jim Epler left a red light at the starting line. Oswald was strong in qualifying. His elapsed time there was a 5:10 and a 5:16 in his first round win. Scusa had qualified 6th with a great 5:16, but slowed to a 5:34. So the margin here all went to Oswald, but Scusa pulled off the upset.
Crew came down here yelling, "Who is that kid? Who is that kid? That kid, you just won by 100. What a drag race."
Oh, boy, I didn't know it was that close. I didn't see him the whole way, but I'll tell you what, this Pontiac body, it is really something. I mean, this thing can go down there, half track, have the wheels up 2 foot in the air, and it's still going straight, you know?
You're having fun.
Pretty wild. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, man.
Dean Scusa stepped up by more than 1/10 of a second in that second round victory over Mark Oswald. That put him into the Final Four. The number 2 qualifier was John Force. He defeated Gary Densham in the first round, while number 7, Tom Hoover, had his share of problems getting a hold of the pavement. That gave Gary Saloni a chance to advance to round 2, where he would meet Force. Force's qualifying time was a great 5:06, only 0.03 of a second slower than Okazaki, and he had the lane choice here, having run a 5:10 in that first round. Force had the wheels up at the starting line, but at the finish he had set them down to a 5:15.
John, it looks like Austin wasn't taking any chances. He didn't really want to run another 5:10.
No, he always backs her down a little bit, but I told him I was having trouble down the racetrack. She has her fronted up. She's driving all over, but, hey, the points are starting to move around a lot, Steve.
That steering wheel is useless if the wheels are in the air.
Oh, yeah, but it really makes it exciting for a driver. Well, Uncle Austin's doing his job, but we got our job cut out.
Got lane choice.
We'll take it.
John came into this race number 3 in points, and he's the one that got the big break as the result of the pairings on the ladder. In the Final Four, it'll be Dean Scusa against John Force, John holding the choice of lanes. The other side of the ladder finds a real big race between Chuck Etchells and Casey Spurlock. We'll be coming right back to Gainesville Raceway and the Mac Tools Gatornationals. The Final Four in Funny Car coming up next. A mountain to climb. The obstacle standing in his way of his first ever final round appearance is none other than the reigning Winston champion, John Force, at the wheel of the Castrol Chevy Lumina. Force has the lane choice. He has been outperforming the field throughout the bulk of the day. A 5:15 in the previous round gives him the choice of lanes. And Scusa gives him a battle. The elapsed time for Force, slowing to a 5:24 and 2:86. Scusa was close behind with a 5:28. A tremendous challenge for Scusa, and he almost made it. The remaining two cars in this semifinal round of funny car competition, the Kendall GT1 Super Winch Dodge of Chuck Etchell is up against the fruit of the loom Dodge Daytona. Casey Spurlock at the wheel. The burnout's underway. These long, smoky burnouts are there for a purpose. They're designed to heat the tires and to get them as clean as possible and to transfer some rubber to the racing surface. A gigantic crowd on hand today at Gainesville Raceway for the silver anniversary Mac Tools Gatornationals. Now, let's go to the far end of the track. Here's Steve Evans.
I don't know, John. I'll say at 5:24, you barely had enough steam to gun that kid down.
Man, I tell you what, everything was going wrong up there. My helmet busted on the starting line, couldn't lock it up there. Trying to silver tape it. She smoked the tires. She's just a weak dog.
Weak dog?
Well, that's what old Castro and them boys pay us for, but what can I say? I'll just talk to Pappy when I get back. Maybe I have to cut a little waves there.
The crew on Chuck Etchell's car, headed by crew chief John Medlin, intently looking underneath that fiberglass body, but they find it to their liking. The body comes down, a check to the roof hatch above Chuck Etchell's head. And here we go, the last race of the semifinal round. Spurlock and Etchell. Spurlock trying to repeat as a champion on the NHRA Winston Trail. He won at Pomona. A close race and a big fire for Chuck Etchels. The win goes to Spurlock. The parachute's off the car, and Etchels has got his hands full. Up against the guardrail, the car comes to an abrupt stop. Etchels inside that burning fiberglass body, and there you see him coming out of the emergency hatch on the roof. Chuck Etchels rolls off the car to the opposite side as the safety safari pulls up and the fire extinguishing compound begins to be applied to the blazing Dodge Daytona. Let's take a look at this one again. The margin of victory at the finish line was only 0.02 of a second, and the win went to Spurlock. But watch Etchels in the far lane just before the finish line speed trap. The problems began. There was a puff, then the oil started coming out of it, and then the fire began. The blaze built in intensity as Chuck Etchels did a magnificent job of keeping the car in his lane. Look from another angle at ground level. The Dodge was moving all over the racetrack. There was a pop. The supercharger may have let go. A rod may have come out. Something dumped a whole lot of oil out of that racing engine. The parachutes were out then. The fire gets to them, but Etchels brought it to a halt. Steve?
You can tell by the helmet there was lots of smoke and fire inside that car. And, Chuck, I don't have to tell you, that was one of the worst ones anyone's had in a long time. You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine, Steve, thanks.
Breathing is usually the biggest problem in those deals.
Well, it shocked me, because it looked like we were starting to drive away from him, and all of a sudden, bang. Not good.
Not good at all. The car, obviously, he did a great job of getting it stopped to get some help, though.
Well, I was hoping to hit something, but not him. I lost my vision totally, and I was trying to get off to the left. Unfortunately, that's what happened.
Etchels brought the car to a stop right up alongside the guardrail. He's headed to be checked out by the safety safari crew. We'll be right back. We predicted WJ against Darrell Alderman, who's had a new engine installed in his Dodge Daytona. Earlier, Steve had a chance to talk with a finalist.
You know, at Houston, Scott went to the starting line knowing he probably didn't have the better car. You may have the better car. How does that change tactics at all?
Well, the rule of thumb that I always go by on staging is that if I have lane choice, I always go in first. I mean, I think that's the fair way to do it. And, and I ran faster than him the last time, and I have lane choice, so I'll go in first. I mean, I might sit there for a little while, but I'll go in first.
Ask Warren which of the Dodges he wanted to race. It didn't matter. They're both just as ugly.
Yeah, we're going to put her in four-wheel drive this final round here and see if we can't get us a win.
Look out for the Jeep.
Well, they're both just sitting there. This could well be described same chapter, second verse. This is what went on 2 weeks ago at Houston with the Oldsmobile of Warren Johnson, and that time the Dodge of Scott Jeffrey on. Now they're in, and Darrell Alderman red lights. Warren Johnson played the game to perfection, and Darrell Alderman wasted a 7-11. The win going to Warren Johnson with a slower 7-13, but it was all decided because Darrell Alderman couldn't keep the clutch in for just a few more thousandths of a second. Let's watch in replay. He left the starting line too soon. The red light came on the Christmas tree, and that indicates instant disqualification. So Warren Johnson extends his lead in the points chase. Darrell Alderman has moved into second, followed by Scott Jeffrey on. Kurt Johnson is fourth, and Jim Yates remains number 5. Steve?
Good thing he red lighted, huh? I didn't even have any idea he red lighted. I thought he had just got the farm, but unbelievable. It's one of those races that some days it goes your way, and unfortunately some days it doesn't.
This is the 4th year you've won here.
It's incredible. I don't know what it is about this racetrack. There's another racetrack over in Tennessee that I almost can't lose at. And what it is, maybe I should buy stock in these racetracks. Congratulations.
Warren Johnson, your champion in Pro Stock Eliminator. This is the final in funny car. You're looking inside the Castrol GTX Lumina of John Force. The body comes up. Austin Coyle, the crew chief, dips under the car, turning on the second magneto to fire the second 8 spark plugs. There's a total of 16, 2 per cylinder. Ronnie Swearingen, the head wrench for Casey Spurlock, gives him the A-OK sign as Hollywood Spurlock continues his quest for a Winston title, returning to this sport after laying out for a few years. He was the NHRA Winston Rookie of the Year back in 1990. Then at the end of that season, stopped racing for a while, and he red lights. Unbelievable occurrences, and John Force is fighting that car all the way through the quarter mile. 1,320 feet of controlled mayhem. John Force wins it at a 5:34, 263-mile-an-hour charge. Let's take a look at this one again as Casey Spurlock in the far lane left the starting line 4 thousandths of a second too quick. He took a shot at the tree and almost pulled it off. But John Force, drifting dangerously close to the center line, was able to corral that Lumina, even though fire was coming out of the headers. He crossed the finish line a winner and advanced in the points chase. In fact, all the way to the top spot, followed by Spurlock, Hoffman, Etchels, and Pendragon. Let's go down to the far end of the racetrack and join Steve.
You know, Spurlock red lighted.
Hard.
Then you flirted with the center line. Had you crossed it, he'd have been the winner, even though he red lighted.
Matter. This heap was on fire. Stuff was flying out the roof. I couldn't even believe it. I didn't know what happened. Then she just drove around that old boy. This is the way. Speaking of my sponsors, Castrol, Jolly Rancher, Wax Shop, Framwell, Wheel, and all my buddies, I'm allowed to say that because I'm calling you for parts. I ruined everything.
And it still isn't over there. It wants more.
Hey, I think we're in the points lead. And the nightmare continues, kiddies.
And what a nightmare it is for his fellow funny car competitors. Of a top fuel eliminator race at an NHRA Winston Championship event. Son Scott Coletta, at the age of 32, is taking on his dad, Connie Coletta, who is 56. Connie, 24 years old when his son Scott was born, picked up his first national event title way back in 1967. That was the year that he won the Winter Nationals at Pomona, California. The fans here in Gainesville getting a real treat, just like the fans in Houston did 2 weeks ago when these two cars squared off, and it produced the quickest side-by-side race ever. Scott won that one. This time it's all the old man as Connie Coletta whips his kid off the starting line, then drives away from him on the racetrack to set low elapsed time of the meet of 4:79 at 290 miles an hour. Watch this one in replay and enjoy. In the far lane is Connie Coletta. He moved first, and the horsepower produced by his crew chief, Tim Richards, more than enough to easily outdistance Scott Coletta towards the finish line. Scotty running into some problems. The car down on horsepower. It was obvious in his elapsed time of 495 at 271. Steve?
Connie Coletta has won the Gatornationals at 4.79 seconds over his own son. Neat, huh?
Neat. Very neat. Real awesome.
Did you think the car would run that well?
Tim says, we'll see if it all works. That's what happened. He pulled it out of the bag.
And it couldn't be finer than racing your own youngster there.
Just awesome, and I'm ecstatic about it.
This drag racing stuff is fun.
It sure is. Sure is. It's fun to win.
And that's a luxury that Connie's not been enjoying as of late. His last victory came way back in 1986. Well, Scott Collette has taken over the lead in the Winston points chase, followed by Joe Amato. Connie has jumped from 8th to 3rd by virtue of the big win. Number 4, Corey Mack. Shelly Anderson is number 5. The 1994 NHRA Mack Tools Gatornationals has been brought to you by new advanced high-tech formula Quaker State Motor Oil. It's formulated for today's high-tech engines.